you can change the choice of enterprise or species. Supposing I have to develop a business plan for different species which I want to plant in a garden, and different species grow at different rates and will mature at different times, and I say, all right, let me work out a 15 years or 20 years cash flow. The shorter the cash flow, higher is the chance, using a constant discount rate, that the fast growing species will become viable. Correct? Is that clear? Simply by numbers, isn't it? Because the cash flow will, when you discount, the cash flow puts more weight on the nearer inflows and outflows. In the long term species, there is only outflow, expenditure, maintenance, no inflow. So in 20 years time, they are not giving you any output, practically, but not much. There is very little value of 20 years tree, unless it is 70 year, 80 year. So it won't make it. Correct? So we want to understand how the tools of looking future needs in present value, the tool may not have been there. 20,000 years ago, NPV was not there. But they had some concept of calculating the present value of future returns. Correct? They must have had some concept. Otherwise, they would not take decisions. You have to take a decision about returns. You have to calculate in today's pragmatic life, in my reality of life today, I have to decide something which has a bearing on long-term decisions, but I must have a calculus by which I can say this is better than this. Correct? So I may use ethics, I may use culture, I may use various means to achieve the same end. Right? So let us look at So there are two dimensions we are taking at this moment, and we will look at how 20,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, people had resolved, and we will see how today we resolve. We will see the tension between the two. So time लगता है, आते हैं 15 मिनट में. So time frame could be short or long. Short could be my lifetime. Long could be my grandchildren's time. So let's say 60 years, 70 years, 80 years. Decision making horizon, I can have few choices, very narrow, or I have lot of choices, very wide. Correct? Now, if you have short time frame and narrow choice, what do you feel? What do you feel about the outcome? How would you, if a society had, a group had short time frame and narrow choice, what will you feel? What kind of prospect the society has? Choices, the range of choices is narrow and the time frame is short. Here choices are more. Here choices are few. So when choices are few and time is short, how would you feel? If you were in a situation when you have to decide whatever you have to decide in the next, let's say 1 week or 1 month or 1 year, and you have hardly one or two choices, what would you feel? Huh? Monotonous. But in terms of variability, what will you say? Is it vulnerable or stable or vulnerable? And here, if you have a lot of choices in the short time frame, what would you like to do? Very vulnerable, no? Because we have more choice, you make less trade-offs. You become less concerned about each choice. Because you think you have a lot. So I can destroy this species, I can destroy that species, I can destroy that species, I am still left with several birds. Not realizing that they are interrelated. There can be a cascading effect. Cascading effect, you understand? Domino effect. So if you remove the keystone species, for example, keystone is a word we use for one such a species, ऐसा पेड़ जिससे बाकी सब species का संबंध ताना बाना बना हुआ है, because it is on the apex, so to say. So if you remove that, then all the other may vanish. Maybe it binds the soil very well. So once the soil is loosened, other species will disappear because they can't hold, So keystone species may have a valid ability to bind the soil, to create a windbreak, various other conditions that are required for that time. So opportunistic but very vulnerable. This one?
So wouldn't that be vulnerable for narrow short?
Huh?
Wouldn't that be vulnerable for short time frame and narrow number of choices? Because
that is very vulnerable. But this one is probably less.
I would agree with why, but in case of narrow, if I have say less number of choices and the time is very short, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm not spoiled for choice. I don't have to make much of a decision as such.
You not make much decisions, and you have not much choice actually. So your degree of the freedom is very limited. Degree of making is simpler, but not durable. The next second case, this one, it is complex, but it is still not durable. The only problem is that in the second case, you feel that you are not going to suffer. You feel that you have a lot of choices, not realizing that they are interlinked. I'll give you some examples. The third one, this one. What is the situation here? Long time frame, but very narrow choices. What will happen here? What could happen? But experimentation, the choices are very narrow.
You do not want to be in a situation like that. If you have a lot of time in and hardly any options.
You wouldn't like to be. Well, in Arctic Circle, the Eskimos have very little choice, but they have a very long time frame. Correct? What do they do?
They're able to choose a sustainable law.
They move. Their vulnerability is very high, so they try to reduce vulnerability through mobility. Shepherds, only sheep, but long time frame, move. But there is a lot of risk. The sheep have on an average 20% mortality, cattle has only 5%. So risk is very high. Time frame is short. So there is a vulnerability, but they try to reduce vulnerability over space. Because time is still very uncertain. We don't know how the next season will be. But we will try and see whether some other place will be better. We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe. So it is still vulnerable, but here you are mobile. Now this one, this is relatively speaking more sustainable, isn't it? Now let us look at a few examples and then see how it happens. We will look at examples which are very old and some very recent. So, and there are 2-3 issues here. One, if you have more choices but you want to use less over long time period, so when you make a decision tree, this or that, first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, a decision tree has to be made over a long time period. You cannot handle that complexity of choices. So what do? You use very simple thumb rules. Very simple thumb rules. So one rule that northeast Meghalaya, parts of Mizoram, some part of Assam, some part of Nagaland, they have got what they call a slash and burn system, right? And earlier they had as long as 30-year cycle. 30 साल के बाद में पहले वो इस पैच पे आते थे. So they realized that the ability of the soil to withstand intensive cultivation is limited. We can clear the forest and grow, but then the trees here will take 30 years to come back or 12 years to come back. So we keep moving. Depending upon the soil on which we are next year, we will grow what is possible, because we have a lot of choices. So our systems of cultivation will change every year, because no two soils are alike. The elevation may be different, sunlight will be different, depth will be different. So you can't grow the same crop everywhere. You have to have a lot of seeds. That means you must domesticate a lot of species. You must do a lot of experiments. You must have a whole lot of tests to see which of these are edible, which are not edible. You must have data on which one will grow under what conditions, because variable, the weather is changing, the soil is changing. Can you imagine now complexity of life? Nothing is constant. Imagine the complexity. If I change every condition every year, soil changes, weather changes, species changes, place changes, and you have to survive next year, and you have to save the seeds which you might need at some other location of similar kind. We don't know what. So some seeds you have to grow even if you don't get enough yield to reproduce the seed, you need to grow them. Very complex situation. Huh? What will they do? They will develop institutions where not everybody needs to preserve all the seeds. Somebody will preserve shrubs, somebody will preserve herbs, somebody will preserve annuals, somebody will preserve perennials, because you need to plant trees also. Specialization will start taking place a little bit. Correct? Because you can't deal with generalized knowledge now. You need more the variability, please understand, more the variability, higher is the specialization. Isn't it true? Because you need expert for each dimension of variability. When I say we must maximize uncertainty, people wonder what am I talking about. But I am talking about a culture which will then develop possibilities of expertise in different domains, even if those domains are not relevant today. But we are ready for catastrophe. So we will not be affected by the catastrophe. Civilizations which survive in the long term do that. Indian civilization is very old. Egyptian was also very old. Greek was very old. The Syrian civilization is very old. So K. M. Munshi once said, 1952 in a lecture, he said those cultures which allowed nature to overrule completely, nature to dominate,